Hey guys, we're starting our second section of the beginning watercolor lecture on landscape painting. The first video we worked on the background of this landscape, and today we're going to be working on the foreground with these nice reflections of the trees and mountains. Now, we want to notice a couple of things about the reflections here, and that is that they are a different color in hue and a different value than the things that they are reflecting, the objects that are being reflected. It's not exactly like working in shadows here. We're going to be working with slightly different colors, and the hues and values are actually going to change, unlike when we're talking about cast shadows. Okay, so I've started by wetting down the paper where I'm going to be working the reflections in the water. I'm going to be working wet into wet here. I'm dropping in a variety of colors. I've just mixed up some phthalo greens, cerulean blue, and I'm actually making some gray in there for the reflections of the mountains. Now, like I said, the colors here are a little bit different than the objects that are being reflected, and this is mainly because the color of the water and the color of the lake there are affecting the colors of the reflections. This varies with atmosphere, this varies with time of day, the kind of light, the quality of the water, how clear it is, how cold it is. In this case, it also affects the shallowness of the water as it moves toward us is affecting the colors. So colors toward the back are actually deeper and darker because the water is getting deeper there. And as it comes forward into the shallow area in the foreground of the painting, we're getting some more warm colors, some more grays that are kind of more of a reflection of more about what the bottom color of the lake is here. So I'm dropping in some darks, and I'm taking my paper towel and I'm pulling out the lights in the reflection, and I kind of want a circular light source in the center of the water, and a reflection of the light source in the center of the water, and the darks creating a halo effect around the outside. I'm dropping in some more cerulean. I'm really pushing some of those warm colors that the lake is giving to our reflections. Working wet into wet, thinking about some of the ripples, and it's just nice the color is mixing itself because the paper is wet. Now I'm using a damp brush to pull out some of the areas that I want to have lighter. Once again, I haven't used any masking fluid here. I'm just relying on being able to pull those lights back out. Now I'm slowing the camera down because some of you requested, it's still sped up, but it's not as sped up. You wanted to see me using the brush. I've created dark shadow using my alizarin and some burnt umber, and I'm using that liner brush to just put in some details. I'm still working pretty loosely. There's a lot of water there, and it's still doing the blending for me. It's mixing those colors for me. I'm choosing to use some more ultramarine in some parts, and then some more burnt umber in others. And I'm thinking about that reflection. One interesting thing is that it is going to be a mirror reflection, and it will never be bigger than the object that it's the reflection is a reflection of. So I might go back in there and mess around with it a little bit. I'm dropping some more darks in the middle ground here. I've decided that my focal point is going to be this little stand of trees, and the areas around it shouldn't be quite as dark, but they're going to be close in the value. Now I've slowed the camera down again, and I'm just putting in this little, I guess it's a pier in the background. One of the things that I want to keep in mind when I'm working on man-made objects, which we will talk about in future videos, is that even though they are relatively straight and probably have been built with boards that are all the same size and they should be very equal and even, I'm kind of going to make them a little bit more uneven when I'm painting them, because we, as viewers, a lot of times we like to see a little bit of sort of natural variation, and we don't like things to be rigid and exactly the same. So I'm making those boards, the posts of the appear a little bit uneven. Now, one of the things I like about this photograph is that it does have a foreground. There's a foreground, a middle ground, and a background. And the foreground, though I don't like it exactly as it is, it really is nice to bring the viewer into the painting. So now I'm working on the foreground, and I've put in a few just strokes of grass using some spring green, and there's a lot of water in there, but now while it's wet I'm dropping in some burnt umber on the shadow side and kind of working it back and forth because we still want to preserve a little bit of the sense that there's a single light source, even in the foreground. It's going to bring the painting together. You can see I'm dropping some phthalo in there, and now I'm putting just a little bit of detail in with a liner brush to indicate the weeds that are growing in the foreground. Now, there isn't any grass on the left-hand side of this picture, but I wanted it to feel inclusive from right to left. You can make decisions like this when you are painting. Change the image to suit you. Now I'm stepping back from the picture and I'm thinking, what is it that the overall image needs? That I've worked the background, the middle ground, and the foreground. What is it that the whole painting needs for it to be successful? And I've decided that I think the values need to be pushed a little more. So I'm coming back into the foreground and I am working a few more darks into those weeds in the foreground because, of course, we talked about atmospheric perspective in the last video. Objects in the foreground are going to have the highest value differences. So it's going to have the darkest darks and the lightest lights. We maybe want to fudge this a little bit because in the foreground those weeds are not my focal point, and the places where the values are the most different, the darkest darks and the lightest lights, that's where our eye is going to go first. So I maybe haven't pushed them as far as I could because I don't want them to be the first focal point. Because I've decided that that stand of trees in the background and its reflection are going to be the focal point, I'm pushing the values there a little bit more. I'm also dropping in a few more colors because I thought maybe it wasn't quite vibrant enough. So I'm just pushing those colors back into the reflection. It's really hard to tell with watercolor because as it dries, these things change. And so when you think you've put down something right, then later you might decide that it isn't as dark or as vibrant as you wanted. I'm a little bit disappointed with the cerulean that I bought. It's definitely student grade, and it's one of those colors that seems to fade worse than others after it is dried. Now I'm putting in a few more dark darks, a few more shadows, just trying to get that single light source effect a little more strongly and worrying about the values around where my focal point are. Now I've decided I didn't want to do this in the first video. I wanted to see after I'd finished my painting, or not finished my painting, I wanted to see after I'd gotten to having the whole paper filled, whether or not I wanted to push some of the darks in the mountains in the background. And I decided I did. So this is going to dry a little bit lighter, but I wanted to put in a few indications, more of the shadows in the mountains, because those are some really nice mountains, and I kind of wanted to call a little bit more attention to them. Now I've decided also, after a final look, that that sort of middle stand of trees is still in the background, but could stand to use a little bit more dark. So I'm using some more ultramarine, some more phthalo, some more hooker's green, to just bring out the darkness in those trees. And now I'm just touching up the last little things, deciding where there needs to be a few more darks. Okay, so here's the completed painting. It's a totally fine painting, especially for our purposes today. But after we talked about it in class, it was brought up that in the first lecture, the students wanted to know what my focal point was. And I sort of sheepishly said, well, it's those trees in the middle ground. It's that stand of trees. And I realized that it's not really a very strong focal point, and it doesn't say that much. It doesn't make me that passionate about the painting. And so we kind of are left with this question of what is the point? And I think that the reason that we plan these out ahead of time and why we choose our images and do our drawings carefully before we actually start the painting is for this purpose. You put all this time in, what's the point of my painting? So that's what we're going to talk about next lecture. We'll do some other landscapes, and hopefully we'll get a stronger focal point and a more interesting painting. Thanks for listening. We will be here next week.